I think that's incredibly
I think that's
unbelievable.
insane. If you think okay, magic works, but tiny guy doesn't work.
I'm saying it is within the realm of believability more than taking a normal guy and having a suit that can shrink you down.
It's
And
not the
you
suit.
clearly
it's
have
the
never
Pym,
seen-
it's the Pym particles, which
The
is
Pym-
a
You've never seen
okay,
Honey, I
but
scientific
Shrunk
discovery.
it's the same premise. It is a unbelievable feat of science that is so far disconnected
just
from a
like
character
the Hulk,
like Iron Man.
just like Tony Stark, just like Captain
No.
America.
No, because
just
they
like
were
stuff in
fundamentally
Guardians
changed
of the Galaxy,
forever.
just like Age of Ultron. I kind of have a question regarding pre-Infinity War Endgame movies.
Okay.
Joe and I had a fairly frequent argument back in the day of the Marvel movies, and he was negative towards them, didn't like them. Correct?
Correct. Well before Infinity War.
Well before Infinity War. And your opinion was that
I think they lost it right around Ant-Man, the first one. And I think that Age of Ultron might be the big. It was fine. Age of Ultron was fine, but I noticed slipping, and everything before that I kind of quantify as pretty enjoyable.
What about Guardians of the Galaxy?
I enjoy there's spots, right? There's
in
spots.
order?
Infinity
I'm
War
pretty
was good. All right.
sure. No.
Infinity War was good.
Yeah,
Yes,
they
these
are in order. Okay, no. So I'm just as a recall and to refresh Joseph's memory of what he said. I remember having a conversation with him about Iron Man 3 and Thor Dark World. So that was where it was. It wasn't Ant-Man. It was a little before that.
Well, I enjoyed most of them. It was Iron Man 3. It was Thor Dark World I didn't care for. I was relatively fine with Iron Man 3, sort of.
So if I think most of these before the, would you say, Endgame?
Yeah.
Before Endgame, most of them are good. I would say there's like 3, maybe 4 that I could cherry pick and be like, yeah, these weren't great movies. They felt like they were just trying to cop out something to get to the next Avenger movie. But I really enjoyed Endgame and those Avenger movies. Those were probably my
Where
favorite.
were you leading to, Wyatt?
So my question was, looking back on these series of movies, where the movies themselves had pretty clear superhero characters, villains, story arcs, and tying everything together, and had a more serious tone to them, and I would say more heart to them than the newer ones. Has your opinion on like these movies as a whole, right, as a collection, has it changed in the of what is interesting content? Because before you were like, I don't like it, I think it's dumb, it's not sustainable. You were right, it wasn't sustainable.
Correct.
It's gonna get too big, they can't keep adding new stuff. You were right, it did, and they started to fail. But this in its own bubble, where do you sit with this cinematic universe?
With like the before it started going, like before
like
Infinity War.
If you consider Endgame like the last movie.
If I consider Endgame the last movie, if they actually stopped it there, I would probably eventually look back with nostalgia. Even the ones I didn't like. I didn't like the third Thor movie. Was it the third or the fourth?
What, Ragnarok?
No, Ragnarok was third. I didn't like the second Thor movie.
Dark I think a lot of people had a hard time with that one.
I was okay with Iron Man 3.
I would actually rather watch Thor over Iron Man 3.
And then, but they came back with Civil War, Captain America Civil War, and I thought that was really strong. They had Guardians of the Galaxies. I never liked it as much as Joshua, not anywhere close. But I was like, it's enjoyable. And then I liked Ultron somewhat. And then once Ant-Man came out, I felt like it devolved into something that wasn't good. I mean, I know Civil War came after Ant-Man, but I'm just saying, like, it just became.
I don't know your issue with Ant-Man.
By time Ragnarok was around, there was a very strong collection of bad ones in my mind, right?
Yeah. Well, I would say Doctor Strange. I would say Doctor Strange. I would actually say Age of Ultron is one of the weaker movies, along with Iron Man 3 and Dark World. But I don't know your issue with Ant-Man.
I think here's where ultimately I think this is where it falls off. When they started getting more and more niche with the heroes they're bringing in.
Okay.
I think that's where I think it's where they started going downhill.
Right. Why is niche bad?
Niche is bad because there's not as broad of an audience for a specific comic book fans, right? Okay. Comic book fans enjoyed Ant-Man.
Right.
And I'm
asking what's wrong with the movie.
What's wrong with the movie?
Yeah.
I think it was ultimately uninteresting. I think the character was uninteresting. Right. I think the premise of a suit that shrinks you down is uninteresting. I don't think it's that strong for a superhero concept. I think it's starting to hit the fringes of kind of the crazy ideas that the comic books delved into.
I
think we lost touch with reality.
I'm going to push back. I don't think a suit that shrinks and grows is nearly as unbelievable as like Hulk or Thor or Iron Man.
No,
I don't think that it's unbelievable, the character, but I think those weren't strong movies. I think
the first Ant-Man
and it has nothing to do with the character.
Let's break this down for what you just said, because what you just said is fundamentally incorrect. All right.
Okay.
So we are talking about So let's start with the obvious. Captain America. He has a science experiments done on him that allows him to have supernatural strength, speed, and the ability to do abnormal things. And he becomes a super soldier. All right. That is a scientific, unbelievable, but scientific process that makes sense. It's very similar with Hulk, right? It is a very similar process. It's a scientific accident. All right. Thor is from another planet in the far reaches of the universe. And so he is a god character. So as much as he's disconnected from reality, it's still based in some form of believability. Then you have Iron Man, who's the ultimate believability. If you can just craft a suit that works to that has the ability to give you essentially superpowers, any man can become the superpower, and his power was his ability to do that, his brain. All right. Then we hit Ant-Man that defies any kind of logic, that it's not a scientific experiment gone wrong to allow people to Hulk out. It's not something that's like a scientific correct experiment like Captain America that worked correctly. It is literally a suit that goes into your physiology and allows you to shrink like your flesh and blood. It disconnects you from any kind of grounded, believable nature, and it loses you. It just loses you. All right. Honestly, I think that someone who has wizard powers, as crappy as Doctor Strange is as a movie, it's more in line with the believability nature because you're dealing with magic than a suit that could turn a regular person into something tiny. I think that's incredibly unbelievable.
I think that's insane. If you think magic works, but tiny guy doesn't work.
I'm saying it is within the realm of believability more than taking a normal guy and having a suit that can shrink you down.
It's not the suit.
Clearly have never seen
the Pym particles, which is a scientific discovery.
It's the same premise. It is a unbelievable feat of science that is so far disconnected from a character like Iron Man.
Just like Tony Stark, just like Captain America.
No, because they were fundamentally changed
Guardians of the Galaxy,
forever.
Just like Age of Ultron, like Wolverine's claws.
Hulk
like
and Captain America was fundamentally changed for the rest of his life. Like, This is something that does not hold any kind of logic to it. There's no like train of logic that can make my mind have an enjoying process, suspending belief. Yes, suspending belief, but as far as to say that the Ant-Man phenomenon works and is believable in any capacity.
Okay.
I think that Hulk, it's a scientific experiment that went wrong, and he is fundamentally changed forever. He has this Hulk out alter ego that will stay with him forever. Captain America cannot reverse the strength of his science experiment. Wolverine, he was born with a specific mutant ability, and then a science experiment changed him to where he becomes more powerful, but ultimately is that way for the rest of his life. Like, he cannot change that. This Ant-Man thing is just like, it's just science. Like, the only thing when it comes to suits that works for me is Iron Man.
This
like
is
Iron
a
Man and
world.
Bible Man works. You know what I mean?
It's not a suit. It's a
with aliens,
particle. It's a particle.
superheroes like X-Men.
We're
superheroes,
exiting
mutants.
reality in my mind.
You
We're
have
exiting reality with the
Mark,
Ant-Man.
Yes.
like Tony Stark, and you don't think that they can make a guy small. I think that's unfar-fetched.
See,
now,
yeah.
yes.
Well, the
This
same
is
thing
a
is with like Endgame. I was super super annoyed with the time travel
No,
aspect
I
because
was too.
that's another element of leaving the grounded foundation that we can easily suspend our belief for superheroes into something that's too far reaching. That's what I
think so. I would agree with you with that. I don't think Ant-Man is a reach as far as believability.
I think it is for me, and I think it is for a lot of people.
I think the box office probably tells a different story on that one, because the first Ant-Man was pretty well received. People liked it. The second Ant-Man is where you come into a little bit of an issue, because that one is not a good movie. And the thing with the first Ant-Man is it follows the formula. He trains, he gets a suit, he learns his powers, he fights the bad guy. It's fun. It all wraps up pretty nicely.
I'm more on Wyatt and saying, like, yes, you can have an Ant-Man. I think Ant-Man was probably the weakest out of all these movies.
It forgettable?
It was a terrible movie.
Was it forgettable?
Yes.
Was it terrible? No.
I'm not saying it was a terrible movie. I'm saying it was the start of the downward spiral that has become Marvel with the multiverse.
I would say,
and the
I would
crazy
rather watch
different
Captain
superheroes.
Marvel than Ant-Man.
I said no.
Josh was trolling.
Yeah.
No, I would rather watch Captain Marvel than Ant-Man.
I would say Ant-Man is the start of the formula where people really noticed. They were like, oh, all the movies are sort of kind of following this formula. And so I would say it's more forgettable than anything else.
Okay. But
a terrible movie is like The Room.
Okay.
You know?
Yes.
Or
example.
any number of B movies are terrible movies. I would say the worst that this has is it's forgettable.
So I'm gonna take it a different direction to expand on my point. So Guardians of the Galaxy is a good, fun movie. All right. It has good, engaging characters that are fun. However, I think it was also adding to the problem that I am trying to represent here. Because up until now, the only thing that was not grounded in Earth believable reality with superheroes was Thor. And that was more ethereal, supernatural kind of style. All right.
Not necessarily, because
they were like friggin' aliens.
Yeah,
dude.
the whole Avengers movie was about aliens.
It was aliens.
It made the universe feel vast. It made it feel very disconnected. And so it was a very special being, right? I was able to not lose myself with the narrative of Thor. When we hit Guardians of the Galaxy, it turned the universe into this wacky, unbelievable place that ripped me out of the believable Earth narrative that that birthed Captain America and Iron Man, right? And
Right.
it added to the problem. And it goes along, it's the same chapter of the same book that I'm saying Ant-Man did for me, all right? The only thing that I don't harp on Guardians of the Galaxy for is because it was fun. It was a fun movie with
Right.
fun characters. But it ultimately accomplishes the same thing that I'm talking about, that it removes you from the world that you felt like was being set up for you.
Yeah. All right. Here's a question that I'm going to ask you to suspend your disbelief here. Okay. Suspend your disbelief by ignoring your disbelief.
Okay.
Right? As a movie series, right? In continuity, do the movies feel like they work within a story?
No.
All of them together? Is that what you're saying?
Together.
No.
I would say yeah. For the
Not
most
all
part,
of
yeah.
them.
As a whole.
Yeah.
Right?
I would say yes, excluding like Hulk, which kind of they were still trying to figure it out during Hulk. And
but even in that one, Tony Stark's in that.
Yeah.
So
no,
that connected.
I think Ragnarok is like the biggest problem with what you're asking. If I suspend my disbelief, and do they all work together as a coherent story inside of a universe? I would say probably all of them, but Ragnarok came out of left field so far that I think it doesn't fit. Ragnarok does not fit in the same way that Love and Thunder does not fit. And that is Taika Waititi.
That's Taika Waititi's fault.
Yes. It doesn't fit.
That's because the Thor the Dark World was a little bit it seemed a little bit dark. It seemed a little bit too emotional, and people were like, Thor is a much, more colorful story than this in his comics. There's always, jokes and it's colorful. It's fun.
Yes.
And so Taika Waititi took that idea and he turned it into Thor Ragnarok, which can be funny and it can be fun, but I think that one takes away a lot of the seriousness that we got in some of the other.
Well, what the foundation of this was supposed to be, right? Which was supposed to be what Jon Favreau was building with Iron Man and these first films. Yes, and the first Thor, I don't think anything's gonna beat as far as movies that Thor is in. I think the very first one, yes, it's different than the comics. I understand that. But I think it worked so well with Iron Man and Captain America that it didn't skip a beat. You know what I mean? And
I would say I think the downfall of the quality in how they write dialogue started with Guardians of the Galaxy, because James Gunn takes a very jokey, fun, kind of interesting thing.
I think it was a little before that.
It works with Tony Stark's dialogue works for him.
Yeah, but
that's fine,
okay, think of the third Iron Man. As much as we'll accept the third Iron Man movie, just think of like that little kid and the dialogue he has with the kid. It doesn't feel...
That's not anywhere close to Guardians dialogue.
It feels like we're in the same universe with Iron Man 3.
It's not close, but it's still starting to slip there.
Guardians dialogue. I'm not talking about... Tony Stark is a big influence on the dialogue and how he quips and says things, right? And the problem is later in the latter half of the movies, everybody has to sort of sound like Tony, and Guardians added to that issue of everybody's got to be, dropping jokes. Everybody's got to be, but if you watch carefully in Guardians, it's more reserved. Not everybody's dropping jokes all the time. It's different. And then the music element made it even more kind of fun. But that one still had emotionality and heart to it. I think once we get to especially Ragnarok,
transcended everything that was being done before
it every movie was doing. Now we're all Guardians movies.
Well, okay, did I see the list here. I'm starting to question if this is the correct order of them. But because I thought Spider-Man Homecoming came out after Ragnarok. Because I remember a series of movies like Ragnarok that I was not enjoying. And then when the first Spider-Man Homecoming came out, I was like, we're back, right? I really enjoyed the first Spider-Man.
I don't know. I don't think it matters a ton where those two are because they're both after Ultron, or they're both after Civil War.
Okay.
And they're both before Infinity War.
So on this list, if I'm going to say what is like an actually bad movie, okay, out of this list, because a lot of these I don't consider bad movies. Believe it or not, I look at the first Black Panther and I don't call that a bad movie, a bad hero movie. The bad movies I would say on this list that we're looking at right now is Captain Marvel and Doctor Strange.
And Ant-Man 2.
And Ant-Man 2, yes. But yeah. I think actually bad movies, like they're so far, they're so out of place. They shouldn't even be on the same board as some of these. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah, I would agree. I would say Black Panther as well. I think that one's bad.
Look, it's not great, but it is not like it can be enjoyable. Black Panther was.
I'm sure it can be, but The Room can be enjoyable too.
I
think that one's pretty bad.
I think Black Panther there was stuff surrounding the movie of culture stuff that, in my opinion, made it I don't want to say worse movie, but I'm gonna say that
you were annoyed. You were annoyed.
Yeah, I was annoyed by the movie only because of the culture around the movie. It had nothing to do with the movie itself.
I'm not talking about the culture. I'm talking about the movie itself. I think is a bad movie.
Well, the end fight was horrible with like the rubber characters
and the CGI was bad, and the logic were pretty bad. They make Wakanda really kind of a sucky country.
Yeah.
Well, at the beginning of the film, Wakanda's kind of cool, and then it becomes less cool the longer the film.
No. They are always not cool.
No, the beginning of Black Panther, Wakanda is interesting and intriguing, and as the film goes on, it becomes less so.
How so?
So I think it's because it's shaded in mystery. It's the first Black Panther. It's the first time we're going to Wakanda, as far as I remember. And the nature of the technology, the nature of a hidden city and a hidden land, and everything just was. It just kind of felt fresh, but not that idea that I'm saying where it leaves reality. You know what I mean? As the film goes on, it does that. But at the beginning of the film, it actually holds a bit of that Marvel Universe believability.
I like Hidden Kingdom. I like Hidden Kingdom and interesting technology. The issue is where they start adding their logic to it, which is Hidden Kingdom with super technology. But they're also like super like egalitarian people. They're extremely kind, and everybody's super smart, and everybody's super happy, and they don't care about anybody else but themselves. Right?
Well, yeah. When you get into who they are as a people,
and I think part of the point of the movie was we need to have a hand in the outside world, but their technology is so far beyond what anybody else can do aside from maybe Tony Stark that the impact that they could have is more than just, buying some buildings in the projects.
This might start an argument, especially in the comments, and I'm going to tread lightly here. I think, how do I say this in the right way?
Joshua says he's about to tread lightly, and he says the most racist thing that we've ever heard.
I haven't said it yet.
You don't have to preface your thoughts. Just say the racism.
I think when Hollywood tries to show us a version of Black culture. It's always not quite
Well,
right.
yeah, I know what you're meaning. I
had the same problem with the Bob Marley movie. It was like, it was a good movie, but there was something, it was like they were trying to hide his faults so that it didn't feel like it was a movie. Needs its downs so it can have its highs. It needs to be that emotional roller coaster. And I think when Hollywood shows us Black culture on film, they show us such a high concept of
it's a flowery version of it because they're a minority and it's like a film made for minorities, so they're afraid to bring out any negative connotation with the people in the story.
But contrasting you don't have your highs without your lows. You need some of the lows to have a good movie.
Contrasting that with Tony Stark, he's a narcissist party boy who doesn't care about anyone but himself, and he has to be redeemed. Like, that's not a positive attribute of his personality. He has to be redeemed from that side of him. So you're 100% right, Joshua. They're scared to lean into negatives about a minority group. That's what Hollywood is. Because they feel like they are perpetuating stereotypes, but really all that it's doing is telling a human story. But whenever it's the same thing, we're getting the exact same thing with women, right? Okay, here's a great example. Christian movies, really bad Christian movies, are almost across the board hated because Christians don't know how to write stories. So they usually create a Jesus character that does no wrong and doesn't have to do anything, and everybody around them is oppressing them. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And they have to try to find their way through this oppressive world. And that's just a dull story. That's not good storytelling. It's the same thing that Hollywood's doing with minority groups, with women, with Black people, and with other minorities. They are abandoning storytelling history and storytelling quality for the sake of not trying to paint any negative connotation onto these characters, but at the same time saying they made a film for minorities. So that's why women in movies are always the key to everything. That's why they're always perfect. That's why if they do anything bad, the story usually turns to make it seem like, oh, they were just reacting in a bad way to a situation that was ultimately caused by a bad man, right? That's the point of Hollywood right now.
Is the most powerful superhero of all time.
Well, she is in the comics, which I think that's a problem with the comics, because whenever you make a character that's that powerful, then it's just like, why are we even telling the story? She could just nuke a planet. You know what I mean?
She's Superman. Yeah.
Like, why do we even tell the story?
So it's sterile morality is what it is. And sterile morality is not interesting.
Not interesting at all. Okay, let me tell you a character who's very interesting. Freaking Thanos. Thanos was very interesting because he had a righteous calling that was ultimately evil, right?
And wrong.
But his foundation of his thought process caused you to think. You know what I mean? Which makes him a good character.
Yeah.
Honestly, I can see what you're talking about with Thanos, but I personally find Thanos stuff boring to me. I don't know why. I don't know what it is with Thanos that
Thanos
makes
might
it
be
boring.
one of the most interesting characters next to Tony Stark in the cinematic universe. In the Marvel,
he's boring on screen though. He's
it's Steve. Steve is Tony's rival for interesting.
I'm not saying the rival. I'm saying
Steve
one
Rogers.
of the. He might be the most interesting character next to Iron Man.
Oh, just
well written, interesting character on screen. Steve is just he has his ups and downs, but he's a little too good. He's a little less interesting because his moral compass is a little too strong. You know what I mean? That's the problem with Captain America.
Maybe
it's you want the moral conundrums. What Tony Stark was an embodiment of a moral conundrum, and the same was with Thanos. That's what I think.
What's our to encapsulate kind of Marvel before the Avenger movies? If you want to say that's what we're talking about. What are we concluding here?
I mean, I wasn't really concluding. because here's the other movies.
Yeah.
And I want you to just look at these long and hard, right? And wish yourself back to the previous one.
For the audios, let me just name them off. You got Black Widow, Shang-Chi, Eternals, Spider-Man No Way Home, which wasn't bad.
Fun.
Doctor Strange, Multiverse of Madness. I can't believe we went to the theater and watched that one.
I mean, I'm okay with that.
Thor, Love and Thunder, Wakanda Forever, The Marvels, Guardians of the Galaxy 3, Quantumania, and then we don't have Blade yet.
Yeah, and then there's Deadpool 3 and Captain America 4, which is coming out fairly soonish.
Which is not going to have Steve Rogers.
Right.
No, it's the what is his name? What are we calling
Black
him?
America, Black African American.
African
Can't call him
American.
You can't call him Black America.
That's what he
Captain
is.
African American.
Captain African American.
Captain Snickers.
No,
Oh
definitely.
my gosh.
Ours were funny, dude. Looking at these, I would say you have one interestingly fairly good movie in Spider-Man No Way Home.
The second would be Guardians 3.
The second would be Guardians 3, which has lots and lots of issues.
I really didn't like Spider-Man No Way Home. The only reason why it was good
Fan
is
service.
because of the cameos in it. It was so full of cameos. People wanted to see all the bad guys and all the Spider-Man, and that was cool, but it was cool for 5 minutes. The movie was a terrible movie.
I thought some of the writing for the villains and the Spider-Men was really good.
The Spider-Man interacting with each other was really good. It was.
I liked
sense.
I thought getting more Green Goblin. You can't go wrong with that. Every scene he's in, he's in charge. He's winning.
Great choice to redeem Dr. Octavius.
Yes,
And great choice to make the antagonist the Green Goblin.
yeah, because
Brilliant choice
he's
on
the
that
one.
part.
He's the one really that you can't redeem. The issues were that like they brought in Sandman, who by the end of Spider-Man 3 wasn't a villain,
Right.
Yeah.
and didn't die.
Also, they brought in the least interesting, like the worst villain in Spider-Man history, in my opinion, which is the Electro guy.
I thought they made
Jamie
Electro. I thought they did. I thought they gave him a little bit of justice in this, and made
A
him
little bit of
more
justice,
interesting.
but he was more interesting than he was in his movie with Andrew Garfield.
I think that was the point. Was to give some of these characters do them a little bit of justice.
Yeah.
And the important thing to remember is that in this movie, the cameos prop up the Tom Holland Spider-Man. They never tear him down.
Right. Even the other Spider-Men.
Yeah, the goal is they build each other up and they never tear each other down. A lot of these other movies are simply boring or bad.
Yes.
Eternals, boring and bad.
Yeah.
Shang-Chi, bad. I wouldn't necessarily say boring, but definitely bad.
That's another huge debate we've had. Freaking that dude, what was his weapon that I harped on and I couldn't get over?
Shang-Chi. Oh,
The guy with the arm?
Was it a retractable blade?
Yeah.
The whole thing. I can't get over that.
Tony has nanotech.
I cannot get over that.
Tony
dude.
has nanotech.
Yeah, Tony does because he's
Tony's
smart
got a
enough to
laser.
figure it out.
Tony has.
He literally shoots a laser out of his wrist.
Tony's character is that he is smarter than everyone else, so he can figure out the tech. I don't like
They had time
street villains
travel.
having the same tech Tony
All right.
Stark
Okay.
has.
By the
In Avengers, there was time
time
travel.
Shang-Chi comes out, Iron Man and the Avengers and
is
aliens-
irrelevant.
No.
apparently.
Listen to me. And aliens have been in this world for like 10 or 15 years at this point. You don't think that thugs and especially rich thugs like the 10 Rings are going to get their hands on some pretty high tech alien tech?
I think that they would, and it would look more like we saw in Spider-Man Homecoming, right?
Mhm.
It's kind of bumbly. It works, but it's ultimately feels like some thugs got a hold of technology they don't fully understand. Shang-Chi, that was just a street bad guy who had
He was not
a
a
weapon.
street bad guy. He
Yes,
was
he
an
was.
employee of the 10 Rings, who's like one of the most powerful groups.
I hated it. I hated
Why
it
wouldn't
so
he have
much.
pretty high-tech stuff?
This is what I'm talking about. Marvel leaves the believable nature of the foundation it was built on. It started with
Maybe.
with Ant-Man, and it kind of started with Guardians of the Galaxies by expanding the universe, which is ultimately necessary for freaking Thanos, but did a disservice to the IP as a
Right.
whole, all right? And Shang-Chi and all of these movies build on that problem. Their foundation is the problem.
Yeah, no. That's not an issue. But arguing that a knife can't come out of a relatively short area, whereas Hulk can just generate
It wasn't
mass.
a knife.
We've
Hulk
had
can
this
just
argument.
generate mass.
Let's be done with it. We've had
But
this argument.
they attempt to explain why Hulk is an anomaly and why it works. This guy is just some random bad guy to fill space in a movie, so it
And
doesn't
he-
make sense why he would have this technology.
And he has a little bit of high quality tech. He's not like shooting knives out of all of his orifices or anything. He's got
Although that would be
one
pretty
thing
cool.
with a
I
machete
am not
that
the
comes out of
only
his
one
arm.
who feels this way.
What
Comments,
about the-
That's
show
like
up.
the lowest issue. Okay.
What about the
here's-
guy on X-Men that shoots those like spiral knife things at
Yeah, he's a mutant. He's growing those. He's a
Yeah,
mutant.
X-Men
well,
is a
no,
different
they grow
beast.
out of his hand. He like
Yeah, he's growing them.
and then he
He's
throws
growing them. He's a mutant. That's different.
X-Men's a different beast because it's a different level of believability it requires for the audience, okay?
It's in the same universe though.
Is it? I guess
No.
now it is.
Technically, sort of.
Yes.
But no, the
The mutant universe is different than the Marvel universe. It just is.
Yeah.
What?
Deadpool crossovers them, but it's
barely.
different, right? The Earth of the X-Men is different than the Earth of Iron Man and
Mhm.
Captain America.
I don't know.
It
Yeah.
is.
We should thank the Patreon.
Well, hold on. Let's
Josh was so done with
I'm-
this.
well, I mean, if you don't have anything interesting to add, that's
Then
you
don't
can't
say
just
anything
make us
at
move
all.
on.
What does Grandma
The
always say?
question, the ultimate question is looking at this list and looking at the films that have come out. Do you long for that previous list?
Of course I do. Of course I do.
Yeah,
It was a fun time in cinema.
it definitely was.
At
I
the
was having a
beginning,
good time.
at the beginning, it was.
I was having fun all the way through.
I was having
Except
fun
for-
until about
except for-
Ant-Man.
We got to Ant-Man 2 and I was like,
Dude, how many films extra did it take for you to get off the train? I got off the train at Ant-Man. When did you get off the train? Ant-Man.
I don't
2?
think I'm off. I think I've seen them all basically.
I wasn't actually off the train because in between movies like Ant-Man 2, Black Panther, The Marvels, Doctor Strange, there were good movies. Infinity War I thought was really strong, and Endgame had lots of strong moments and kind of wrapped everything up pretty good thematically. But I knew by the writing in Endgame and by the writing in some of the last few movies that they weren't doing as hot. And then Black Widow came out and I was like,
Catastrophe.
this is bad.
Yeah, Black Widow was really bad.
Yeah, Black Widow. And then I sort of lost touch. And Shang-Chi and the Eternals came out. And both of those were bad. And I was like,
those were the movies that gave you the
Shang-Chi just-
reality check.
Did that go straight to streaming? I don't
No.
remember.
nope.
It was in theaters.
It was
Both
in
Did we
theaters.
go watch it? I know this came out when we were in Virginia. Did we go watch it?
Shang-Chi? Yeah,
Did we?
no.
No,
We did not
I'm
watch
pretty
Shang-Chi in
No,
theaters.
we didn't go watch it.
I thought it came out straight to streaming because I thought we all watched it together.
Maybe we did.
You're
I
asking me to
think-
remember a
I
pointless
remember
time
us
in my
all
life.
watching it, and this is where Joseph was mad at the sword guy.
I know Black Widow. Came out under streaming because Scarlett Johansson had an
Yes.
issue with that.
Yes.
Shang-Chi might have come out for streaming as well. But
yeah,
anyway,
I think I'm technically not on the train, but I've seen all of them except for Deadpool. So the third
I
one.
haven't
was-
watched Quantumania.
It
I
was the
skipped that one.
last.
And
It was
Wakanda
the last
Forever.
couple of movies. It was the last couple of movies. I could tell by the writing in the last couple of movies that they were on a downward spiral.
Wyatt, did you watch Quantumania?
No.
I watched
Yeah,
it because I remember
I
you came
skipped.
in when I was watching it, and you were like, "What?" And I was like,
No,
"Yeah,
on
yeah."
this list. So I even though I was off the train, I still was watching the movies. But when I say off the train, what I mean is I am not believing this is a good franchise anymore because I'm seeing where we're going with this.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I mean. Like up until Ant-Man, I was like, I am on board. I want to see the next movie.
Mm-hmm.
Then after that, I just got bad movies, disappointment with a couple happy moments. That's it.
Yeah.
And with this list, I haven't even seen all these. I skipped Wakanda Forever because I've seen enough. Quantumania because I've seen enough. And the Marvels, obviously, because the entire internet told me not to watch it.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah, I mean, if you had hard with the Ant-Man stuff, I'm sure all the stuff afterwards was like insane.
Yeah.
He's like
You
a
watch-
guy who can
You watched
shrink.
Eternals.
He's like a no to a guy who can shrink, and then
No.
there's people like throwing rings off their arms and dudes snapping their fingers with gems,
like,
and turning people
you
into
have Harry
butterflies.
Styles.
I told you I
He's like,
enjoyed
"No,
Infinity
no."
War. I enjoyed the Spider-Mans, okay?
He's like, let's go back to the guy that can shrink.